Well, thousands of shoppers will hit the streets this Friday searching for super sales on one of the busiest shopping days of the year. As you head to your favorite stores, you're also likely to notice some big empty buildings.
Some at retailers that just closed, others have been vacant for years. Tonight in a News Channel 15 special report, Alyssa Ivinson investigates how so many spaces can be available and what it'll take to fill the big empty.
When you see a big old building with a huge empty parking lot and a for lease sign, what do you think? Signs of a struggling city or just signs of the times? Well, we set out to discover what's behind the big empty. They're big.
Some of the buildings are challenging.
And they're empty.
No one wants to see it. It creates blight.
Drive around Fort Wayne and it's not too hard to find a lot of available retail spaces. Many of them huge spaces.
Some of these buildings have been on the market for many, many years.
Commercial real estate firm the Zacher Company says there are 18 big box spots vacant around town, each space 20,000 square feet or more, all just sitting and waiting.
There's more buildings available today than there were 5 years and 10 years ago.
The question is why?
The functions, the retail concepts change. What was functional and effective many years ago, 10 or 20 years ago, is no longer what they need to have today.
There's a lot of consolidation that's been happening. Obviously, the economy took its toll on retail businesses.
It's about a customer walking in the door and paying money for their products. If they're not enough to do, then they close them.
Kroger says there's another reason too. Of the big empty stores in Fort Wayne, Kroger or Scott's locations account for nearly a third.
It's just a necessary part of the retail process if you want to keep pace with your customer expectations and where those customers physically are.
To change with its customers, Kroger built 2 larger marketplace stores and remodeled other locations.
Overall, in the Fort Wayne market in particular, we made one of the largest capital and job investments in the country.
That still leaves large spaces waiting for new life.
People, they focus on that temporary period when a building is empty, and they don't focus on the new opportunity it creates for some other business.
The trick is getting another business to move in.
It's very challenging.
Challenging for a few reasons. One, it might take a little creativity.
In many cases, I think the conclusion is that they have to go to an alternative use, like they're no longer going to be a retail use.
Call centers, for example, there are creative developers that are able to turn a big open space into office spaces or cubicles.
Or the building owner might not be in a rush to find a new tenant.
Most communities have the same situation where retailers do no longer operate in those buildings. Unfortunately, in many cases, they're still paying rent. So the motivation by the building owner isn't quite as strong to aggressively go look for a replacement until that lease runs out.
Even with empty storefronts around town, Fort Wayne's director of redevelopment says the city's economy is strong. When we come back, we'll discover how Fort Wayne compares to other cities and find out what Fort Wayne is doing to help fill the big empty. Welcome back. Before the break, we saw that there are a lot of big empty retail spaces all around Fort Wayne. Now we'll discover it's an issue city leaders don't take lightly, and Fort Wayne isn't alone.
In no way do I think Fort Wayne has an overabundance compared to other markets our size or bigger. In fact, I think we're probably in better shape than a lot of cities.
So just how does Fort Wayne stack up? We did a search for all available retail space on showcase.com for Fort Wayne and 5 other cities of similar, smaller, and larger sizes. To make all things equal, we'll look at the number of spaces 20,000 square feet or larger per 100,000 people. Fort Wayne has 7. Jersey City, New Jersey and Henderson, Nevada are closest to Fort Wayne's population. They're both faring much better when it comes to large retail space for lease. But in the Midwest, Fort Wayne's stronger than South Bend and Dayton, Ohio, with Indianapolis slightly lower.
We should interpret that to being a phenomenon that's specific to Fort Wayne, okay? That's true across many communities, in fact, most communities.
While there are a lot of for lease signs, there are success stories too. Sometimes another large retailer will move in, like DSW in the old World Market building. And sometimes the type of business completely changes. This old Kroger store will transform to indoor storage units.
It's very unusual that a store would not find some new tenant, and in many cases what happens to these retail stores is they become a great entrepreneurial opportunity.
Fort Wayne's not just standing by while storefronts sit empty either. It's given places struggling to find tenants designations as an economic development target area. If a business moves into a building in one of these orange areas, it could get a grant to help fix cosmetic issues, and property taxes on any improvements increase over time instead of all at once.
Tax abatement for retail is generally not something, an option on the table. We're there on the front end to help deal with the startup costs, but in most cases it's going to need to make sense financially long term for the buyer, for the tenant, for the owner of the building.
The good news is while it seems nothing is changing for these spaces, experts see things turning around.
I'd like to think that we've reached the peak and there aren't going to be, that is, we're at the high water mark, and that we'll start filling these buildings, and that you won't see more coming available.
And sooner or later somebody's going to come by and say, I'd like to rent the space. I believe that.
Steve Zacher says he hopes to see the big box space available cut in half in the next 3 to 5 years. But what about the smaller spaces in strip malls? Ever notice how a new building might be built right next to an available space? Tomorrow we find out why. In Studio 15, Alyssa Ivinson, News Channel 15.